The harsh fluorescent lights of Riverview Memorial Hospital blurred into streaks as Elena Vance navigated the bustling corridors. Her sensible heels clicked a frantic rhythm against the polished linoleum, a stark contrast to the vibrant bouquet of sunflowers clutched in her left hand. Each petal seemed to vibrate with her own hurried energy. "Room 412, she muttered, checking the small slip of paper Chloe had texted her. "Almost there. Just a little more." Her best friend, Chloe, was recovering from an emergency appendectomy, and Elena was already running late. Time was always a thief, but tonight, it felt like a relentless pursuer. She just wanted to see Chloe's familiar, smiling face. Elena finally reached the door marked 412. Taking a deep breath, she gently pushed it open, expecting to see Chloe's bright, slightly pained grin. Instead, the room was dimly lit, quiet, and occupied by an unfamiliar, still figure in the bed. Her heart did a curious little stutter step. This wasn't Chloe. The figure was clearly a man, his form obscured by the crisp white sheets, his face turned mostly away. A wave of confusion washed over Elena, quickly followed by a dawning, mortifying realization. She'd made a mistake. A big one. She stood frozen, the vibrant sunflowers suddenly feeling absurdly out of place in the sterile quiet. Just as she considered a hasty retreat, a slow, deliberate movement from the bed caught her eye. The figure stirred. Panic flared. Elena's mouth opened, a stammered apology dying on her lips. Before she could utter a coherent word, the man in the bed slowly turned his head. His eyes, a startling, piercing blue, opened and fixed on her. They held an intensity that seemed to cut through the dim light, an almost ethereal quality that sent a shiver down her spine. A low, raspy whisper broke the silence, a voice that seemed to echo in the quiet room. "I've waited for you." Elena froze, her breath catching in her throat. The sunflowers slipped a fraction in her grasp. What did he mean? Was he delirious? Or was there something impossibly, unsettlingly profound in those words? The air thrummed with a sudden, inexplicable intrigue. Elena's face flushed crimson. Oh, I am so incredibly sorry," she finally managed, her voice a little too loud in the stillness. "I must have the wrong room. My friend Chloe is in 421, not 412 clearly. I deeply apologize for the intrusion." The man's lips curved into the faintest, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile that softened the intensity in his eyes, just enough to make him seem less like a mystical prophet and more like a person. "No need to apologize," he rasped, his voice still a little weak. "I thought you were the nurse bringing my dinner. My call button seems to have abandoned its post, just out of reach. Could you perhaps grab that water glass for me?" A wave of relief, mixed with residual embarrassment, washed over Elena. A flicker of amusement, too, at the mundane reality behind his enigmatic pronouncement. "Of course," she said, stepping closer. As she reached for the water glass on his bedside table, her eyes snagged on a sleek, undeniably expensive watch glinting on his wrist. Beside it, a high-tech laptop lay open, its screen displaying complex code. This wasn't just any patient. She handed him the water, and he took a long, slow sip before meeting her gaze again. "Marcus Thorne," he said, extending a hand that, despite the IV line, still felt firm. Elena's mind raced. Marcus Thorne. The name, the face, the reputation. Her eyes widened. "Marcus Thorne?" she repeated, a stunned whisper. "As in CEO of Innovate Technologies?" A subtle shift passed over Marcus's face. The vulnerable patient receded slightly, replaced by a hint of the powerful CEO she knew from countless business articles. He nodded, a wry glint in his piercing blue eyes. The one and only, currently grounded by a moment of distracted driving. Elena felt a fresh wave of mortification, quickly followed by a jolt of professional interest. Elena Vance, senior account manager at Carson & Associates, she managed, offering her hand, grateful it didn't tremble. "It's an unexpected pleasure." Marcus's grip was firm. "Carson & Associates," he mused, a thoughtful expression on his face. Yes, I believe Innovate has been considering your firm for our upcoming marketing campaigns. A new kind of tension, electric with professional opportunity, now filled the room. The professional implication hung heavy in the air, transforming the accidental meeting into something far more significant. Elena felt a sudden, awkward urge to retreat. Well, I should really go find Chloe. I'm sure she's wondering where her sunflowers are. She began to gather her things, the bouquet feeling even heavier. But Marcus's voice stopped her. "Wait," he said, a compelling blend of challenge and vulnerability in his tone. "You've already seen me at my worst. Humor me for a few more minutes? I could use the company." He reached out a hand, not quite touching hers, but the gesture was enough. Elena hesitated, her internal debate raging. Leave and risk missing a crucial networking opportunity, or stay and risk blurring the lines of professional decorum? Curiosity, and something else she couldn't quite name, won out. She slowly sat back down. "So, the distracted driving," Elena prompted, trying to sound professional, though her mind was still buzzing. Marcus offered a self-deprecating smile. "Guilty as charged. Trying to fine-tune a new algorithm on my laptop while navigating rush hour. Not my finest moment." He gestured vaguely at his bandaged arm. "Just a few broken ribs. Nothing serious. But the hospital staff, bless their hearts, decided to put me in this very specific room." He paused, his gaze lingering on her. "Funny, isn't it? I had this gut feeling, like I was meant to be here, in this exact room, tonight." Elena felt a subtle tremor in her chest. His words, reminiscent of his earlier, "I've waited for you," now carried a different weight. Was it just a coincidence? Or was there something more deliberate in his choice of words? "The sunflowers," Marcus said, his gaze drifting to the vibrant yellow blooms in her hand. "They're beautiful. For Chloe, you said?" Elena nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yes, she's my best friend. She'll love them." A comfortable silence settled between them, a fleeting connection forming in the quiet hospital room. It was an understanding that transcended their brief, strange encounter. Marcus sighed, a soft sound. "You should go then. She's waiting." Elena's heart felt a pang. She wanted to stay, to delve deeper into the intriguing mystery that was Marcus Thorne. But he was right. Chloe was waiting. She slowly began to gather her bag, a bittersweet sense of parting washing over her. As Elena stood to leave, an impulse struck her. She looked at the vibrant bouquet, then at the empty vase on Marcus's bedside table. Without a word, she gently separated two perfect sunflowers from the rest. Their bright yellow petals seemed to glow in the dim light. She placed them carefully in the vase, a small defiant splash of color against the sterile white. "For you," she said, meeting his gaze, "to brighten things up. And get well soon, Marcus Thorne." A surprised, then pleased expression crossed his face. Elena offered him a confident smile, a silent acknowledgement of their unique, accidental connection. With a final, lingering glance, she turned and walked out of room 412, her mind already replaying every strange, intriguing moment. Elena finally found room 421, a soft sigh escaping her lips as she pushed open the door. Chloe, pale but smiling, was propped up in bed, already surrounded by a small bouquet of cheerful balloons. "You made it!" Chloe croaked, her voice still a little weak. Elena offered a warm hug, but even as she chatted about Chloe's successful appendectomy, her mind kept drifting. Back to room 412. To those piercing blue eyes and the startling whisper, "I've waited for you." It had been swiftly explained away, of course, a simple misunderstanding. But a strange pull lingered, a sensation that their encounter wasn't entirely accidental, a feeling that something, or someone, had steered her down the wrong corridor, towards a path she hadn't anticipated. Was it just exhaustion, or was there a thread of predestination weaving itself into her life? The next morning, the fluorescent lights of Carson & Associates felt particularly harsh. Elena had barely settled at her desk, still replaying the hospital encounter, when David, her boss, burst into the conference room, his face a mask of urgency. "Emergency meeting, everyone, now," he barked, his usual composure shattered. Elena's colleagues exchanged panicked glances as they scrambled to their seats. David slapped a folder onto the table, his voice strained. The Innovate Technologies pitch? It's been moved up. To Friday. We have less than 48 hours. Elena's stomach dropped. Innovate Technologies. The same Innovate Technologies whose CEO she had just met, by accident, in a hospital room. Was this a cosmic joke? Her phone buzzed, vibrating insistently on the polished surface of her desk, a stark contrast to the sudden, frenzied energy of the office. Elena stared at her phone. An unknown number. She picked it up, her heart doing a strange flutter as she saw the message. It was from Marcus Thorne. Thank you for the sunflowers, Elena. They brightened up the gloom. I'd like to extend my gratitude properly. Dinner tonight? And perhaps, if you're interested, I could offer some insights on what Innovate is really looking for, beyond the board's stated needs. Elena's breath hitched. Insights. Insider information, essentially. Her ambition flared, a hungry beast stirring within her. This wasn't just a dinner invitation. It was an offer of a golden key, a direct line to the man who held the power. But it was also an ethical tightrope, thin and dangerous. Should she accept? The chaotic office faded into a blur as she wrestled with the implications, her gaze fixed on the compelling words on the screen. Later that morning, in the same conference room, Elena grappled with an internal war. Her ambition, fueled by the sheer magnitude of the Innovate account, battled her ingrained sense of integrity. David, oblivious to her moral quandary, only intensified the pressure. This is it, Elena, he stressed, pacing nervously. Innovate is our biggest potential win this quarter. We can't afford another misstep. Not after Meridian, the Meridian project. A past failure, a strategic miscalculation that had cost Carson a significant client, and Elena a chunk of her confidence. The sting of it still lingered. David's words were a blunt reminder of her desperate need to succeed, to prove herself. The weight of expectation, both her own and David's, pressed down on her, urging her to consider Marcus's offer, no matter the ethical cost. Marcus's follow-up text arrived later that afternoon, almost as if he sensed her hesitation. Think of it as a pre-pitch informal discussion, purely professional, of course. Valuable insights, no strings attached. Elena reread it, a calculated resolve settling over her. She would go, but on her terms. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I accept. My understanding is this is a business meeting to discuss Innovate's needs. Nothing more. She hit send, a determined set to her mouth. Internally, a spark of excitement ignited, acknowledging the thrilling risk she was taking. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was a high-stakes game, and she was ready to play. With her response sent, Elena immediately immersed herself back into pitch preparation, the glowing screen reflecting her focused intensity. The next 2 days blurred into a whirlwind of research and creative energy. Elena transformed her desk into a miniature war room, fueled by endless cups of coffee and an unwavering determination. She delved deep into Innovate's smart home system, HomeSync, meticulously overhauling Carson's initial pitch to align with her growing understanding of Marcus's vision. Then, a setback. A newly released market report contradicted some of her core assumptions about user adoption rates, threatening to unravel her entire strategy. Frustration gnawed at her, but Elena refused to yield. She worked late into the night, poring over data, cross-referencing sources, until a new, brilliant angle emerged, one that not only addressed the conflicting data, but strengthened her privacy-focused approach. The discarded, incomplete slide lay crumpled in her wastebasket, replaced by a triumphant new one, ready for battle. Thursday afternoon arrived. A brief pause before the storm. Elena, dressed in a sharp navy dress, touched up her lipstick, her reflection showing a hint of nerves behind a professional facade. Looking nice, Elena? Brenda, her office neighbor, observed, her eyes twinkling. Good pearls. Big dinner tonight? Elena offered a brief, slightly flustered smile. Just a business meeting, she clarified, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Her heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. She grabbed her clutch, the weight of the evening ahead a palpable presence. Stepping out of the Carson & Associates office building, Elena found a sleek black car waiting at the curb. A uniformed driver held the door open. Inside, Marcus Thorne looked remarkably recovered from his hospital stay. Gone was the vulnerable patient. In his place sat a commanding CEO, dressed in an expensive charcoal sweater that accentuated his broad shoulders. His blue eyes, though still intense, held a subtle, practiced charm as he offered a smooth greeting. Elena. Right on time. Elena felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite name. Relief that he was well, impression at his swift recovery, and a growing curiosity about the man who effortlessly exuded power and charisma. The city lights began to blur as they pulled away, heading towards the unknown. The car delivered them to a small, elegant restaurant downtown, tucked away from the bustling main streets. Soft lighting, hushed conversations, and the gentle clinking of silverware created an intimate atmosphere. It was the perfect setting for intense conversation, a place where secrets could be shared and strategies forged without interruption. Elena felt a slight intimidation at the luxury, but also an appreciation for the thought clearly put into the choice. This was no casual diner. This was a place for important discussions. So Elena began attempting to steer the conversation to business as soon as they were seated. About Innovate's marketing strategy. Marcus held up a hand, a faint smile playing on his lips. All in good time, Elena. First, tell me about you. Not Carson and Associates, not the pitch. You. His directness surprised her. He asked about her journey, her passions, even her past professional failures. Elena, hesitant at first, found herself opening up, revealing the sting of the Meridian project. Marcus listened intently, his gaze unwavering. I'm looking for someone with integrity, Elena, he said, leaning forward. Someone who understands that a company's soul is more valuable than a quick profit, an ally against unseen forces. He paused, his blue eyes glinting. That, wrong room, entrance, it felt like fate, didn't it? But sometimes, fate needs a little push. Elena felt a growing sense of trust, and a thrill of intrigue. Marcus was playing a deeper game, and he was inviting her into it. The soft clink of silverware against porcelain did little to cut through the sudden tension that settled between Elena and Marcus. The elegant restaurant, moments ago a haven of budding connection, now felt like a strategic battleground. Marcus leaned forward, his earlier charm replaced by a grim determination. The board, he began, his voice dropping, specifically Silas Croft, is heavily pushing for Apex marketing. It's unusual. Silas has always been influential, but this is a blatant, almost aggressive push to get them on board. Elena's brow furrowed. She knew Apex. They were big, well-funded, but their reputation for aggressive, data mining strategies often clashed with client values. Marcus's mention of Silas Croft, the formidable board chair of Innovate, conjured images of subtle, insidious manipulation. The air thickened with unspoken corporate intrigue. Elena felt a cold knot form in her stomach. This wasn't just a pitch, it was a power play. Marcus must have seen the concern in her eyes. He offered a small, reassuring smile, a glint of steel returning. But I haven't been swayed. Not yet. I remember Carson and Associates from the Altitude Airlines campaign. Your team's creativity was undeniable, Elena, and your personal touch on that campaign? Stellar. Apex has resources, yes, but I see more hunger, more genuine innovation in your firm, more integrity. A warmth spread through Elena, chasing away some of the chill Silas Croft had brought. To hear Marcus Thorne, CEO of Innovate Technologies, praise her work, her firm, with such sincerity, it was a profound validation. Her shoulders straightened a fraction. This wasn't just about winning a client. It was about proving their worth to someone who truly appreciated it. The professional pride that swelled within her felt like a welcome counterbalance to the ethical tightrope she was walking. Emboldened, Elena leaned in. Tell me about HomeSync then. What's the true vision, beyond the press releases? Marcus's eyes, those piercing blue eyes, lit up. The corporate CEO facade melted away, revealing the passionate visionary. HomeSync is more than just a smart home system, Elena. It's about empowering users, giving them control over their digital lives. Our core differentiator is local data processing. We built it so that user data never leaves their home network unless they explicitly choose it. Privacy is not a feature. It's the foundation. Elena's marketing mind immediately began to spin, ideas sparking. This wasn't just a product. It was a philosophy. A vital, ethical stand in a world increasingly commoditizing personal information. She understood then why this pitch meant so much to him, why Silas's interference felt like a betrayal. It wasn't just about business, it was about the soul of Innovate. This was a vision she could genuinely champion. You know, Elena mused, a soft smile playing on her lips. The media portrays you as this ruthless, unyielding CEO, but you're not quite that. Marcus chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. Appearances can be deceiving, Elena, and I've learned to manage them. His gaze held hers, a flicker of vulnerability passing through his eyes. You're observant. Which makes me wonder, you asked about Innovate's board earlier. What about my past? Specifically, Julian Reed? Elena hadn't expected him to be so open. Julian Reed, she repeated, remembering the name from old tech articles. Your co-founder. What happened? Marcus sighed, a shadow crossing his face. Julian and I had different visions. Innovate was always about innovation, but for me, it was always tied to integrity, to the user. Julian, he saw opportunity everywhere, often at the expense of those core values. It was a painful split, but a necessary one. We simply couldn't walk the same path without compromising everything I believed in for Innovate's future. Just as Elena was about to respond, a discreet waiter arrived with their dessert. Before they could even spoon into the rich chocolate lava cake, Marcus's phone vibrated insistently on the table. He glanced at the screen, and his jaw tightened. A frown, deep and immediate, etched itself onto his face. He declined the call, letting it go to voicemail. Silas, he stated, his voice clipped, a clear edge of annoyance in his tone. Persistent as ever, he's probably calling about the Apex decision. He's eager to push it through before the board meeting tomorrow. Elena felt a fresh wave of concern. Silas Croft wasn't just an influential board member, he was actively, aggressively interfering. The ticking clock on the Innovate pitch now felt far more urgent and far more dangerous. The elegant dinner, for all its charm, was undeniably part of a much larger, high-stakes game. Perhaps, Elena began, a touch of indignation in her voice, my pitch tomorrow will just be a formality then? Marcus's eyes snapped to hers, intense and direct. He reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. A spark of electricity passing between them. No, Elena, absolutely not. Your pitch is crucial. More than that, I need an ally. Someone who genuinely understands Innovate's true needs, not just what a few board members think they want. Someone who can see beyond the numbers and grasp the core mission. He squeezed her hand, his gaze unwavering. Someone like you, Elena. Her heart skipped a beat. The touch, the directness, the plea in his voice. It was both a professional lifeline and something far more personal. She felt a surge of shared purpose, a deepening of the connection that had started in a dimly lit hospital room. This was no longer just a client. It was a cause. The drive back to Elena's apartment was quiet, the city lights a blur outside the tinted windows of Marcus's car. Elena's mind, however, was anything but still. She replayed every word, every glance, every subtle shift in Marcus's expression. The professional implications of this dinner were staggering, a potential game-changer for Carson and Associates. But the personal connection she'd felt, the undeniable pull towards Marcus Thorne, was even more profound. He was charming, yes, but also fiercely principled, vulnerable, and utterly compelling. The lines between business and something deeper had blurred, tangled into an intricate knot. She found herself grappling with the ethics of it all, the thrilling, dangerous excitement of being drawn into his world, his battle. The car pulled up outside her apartment building, the engine idling softly. Marcus turned to her, that enigmatic smile playing on his lips again. Thank you, Elena, he said, his voice a warm rumble in the quiet night. For dinner. And for listening. He paused, his blue eyes holding hers. Friday might surprise us all. His knowing glance, so fleeting, sent a shiver down Elena's spine. It wasn't just a hopeful comment. It felt like a confirmation, a subtle reinforcement that his wrong turn, plan, whatever it entailed, was already in motion. She wanted to ask what he meant, but his expression closed off, the CEO facade returning. He simply nodded, a silent farewell, as the driver opened her door. Elena was halfway to her door when her phone buzzed, startling her. It was a text from Chloe. Asterisk spill. Secret dinner with the CEO? Details, woman, all the details. Elena rolled her eyes, a small, exasperated smile touching her lips. Even her best friend knew, or at least suspected. She sighed. The weight of the evening, the corporate intrigue, and the undeniable personal entanglement settling over her. This was going to be an interesting conversation. And Friday, it seemed, was going to be even more so. Friday morning arrived with a vengeance. A torrential downpour lashed against Elena's apartment window, mirroring the turbulent storm brewing within her. She was sleep-deprived, her eyes faintly shadowed, but her resolve was ironclad. She'd spent half the night refining the pitch, every word, every data point, sharpened to a fine edge. Well, you look like you wrestled a bear and lost, Brenda, her office neighbor, commented casually as Elena walked past her desk, clutching a lukewarm coffee. But a very well-dressed bear, I'll give you that. Good pearls, Elena, for a losing battle. Elena managed a curt, tired smile. Just a long night, Brenda? She ignored the losing battle comment. But the words echoed her own internal dread. The biggest pitch of her career was today, and the odds felt stacked against her. The storm outside seemed to mock her, a prelude to the chaos she instinctively knew awaited her. The air in the Carson & Associates conference room was already thick, with the scent of stale coffee and nervous energy, but Elena Vance felt a fresh wave of nausea as David burst through the door, his face a mottled red. 11 a.m., he gasped, barely coherent. Innovate just called. The pitch has been moved up to 11 at their headquarters, and Silas Croft, the board chair, will be there. Personally. Elena's stomach plummeted. This wasn't just an acceleration. It was a deliberate ambush. Silas Croft, the man Marcus had warned her about, was there to ensure their failure. Panic flickered through the team. Quick, worried glances exchanged across the table. Elena's hand tightened around her presentation folder, the glossy cover crinkling under the sudden pressure. A sense of unfairness, sharp and bitter, rose in her throat. She met David's frantic gaze, forcing a calm she didn't feel. This was a setup, a clear attempt to rattle them. But beneath the fear, a cold resolve began to solidify. Elena moved through the frantic office, a strange calm settling over her. She knew this was a test, and she refused to break. David kept glancing at her, a silent question in his eyes, but she maintained a facade of unwavering confidence, avoiding his gaze. Her mind, however, raced. The secret alliance with Marcus, the insider information, the shared understanding of the stakes. It all felt like a dangerous game she was playing alone, even as her team scrambled around her, stuffing last-minute printouts into binders. Outside, the heavens had opened. Torrents of rain lashed against the office windows, mirroring the storm brewing inside her. They piled into two black taxis, the city lights blurring into streaks as the cars fought their way through the downpour. Elena stared out, watching the imposing glass and steel edifice of Innovate Technologies loom larger with every block. The calm before the storm. Would her secret be exposed? The Innovate Technologies headquarters was a monument to modern ambition. Soaring ceilings, polished marble floors, and a sleek, minimalist design that whispered of power. Elena and her team stepped out of the taxi, rain-soaked and a little disheveled, feeling conspicuously small. Busy, confident, Innovate employees glided past, their faces impassive. The sheer scale of success here was intimidating. A stark contrast to Carson & Associates, more modest downtown office. Elena felt a familiar knot of nerves tighten in her stomach. This was the big leagues, a formidable environment designed to make underdogs feel exactly that, out of their depth. She straightened her shoulders, a silent promise to herself that she wouldn't let it show. Escorted to the boardroom, Elena's breath hitched. It was even more imposing than she'd imagined. A long, polished table gleamed under spotlights, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs. Innovate executives, a formidable array of stern faces, were already seated. At the head, Marcus Thorne, looking powerful and impeccably dressed, held a neutral expression, his gaze sweeping over them briefly before settling on a point just beyond Elena. Beside him sat Silas Croft, the board chair. His presence radiated cold disdain. His eyes, sharp and critical, lingered on Elena for a beat too long. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension, a palpable sense of foreboding that this wasn't just a pitch, it was a battleground. The battle lines were drawn. Before Marcus could offer even a polite greeting, Silas Croft leaned forward, his voice curt and dismissive. "Thank you for joining us, Carson and Associates," he stated, his tone devoid of actual gratitude. "We're on a tight schedule. Apex Marketing has a presentation immediately following yours, so please, be concise. We appreciate your time." He offered a thin, almost imperceptible smirk, a clear slight aimed directly at Carson and Elena. It was an immediate, aggressive attempt to undermine them, a public display of his bias. Elena felt a surge of indignation, a flash of hot anger at being so brazenly underestimated. David, beside her, looked visibly flustered, but Elena met Silas's cold stare with a determined gaze of her own. David began with a shaky overview, but Elena knew the real work was hers. When it was her turn, she stepped forward, her professional navy dress a stark contrast to the sterile room. She made deliberate eye contact with each executive, her gaze lingering on Marcus, who offered a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Then she launched into her pitch, her voice clear and strong. "Innovate Technologies stands at the precipice of a new era," she began, her passion for HomeSync shining through. "And Carson and Associates is uniquely positioned to represent it not just as a product, but as a revolution with privacy at its core." She emphasized the unique selling points she'd gleaned from Marcus, the very vision he held so dear. As Elena spoke, she felt a shift in the room. Her words, carefully crafted around the emotional connection users sought and the critical importance of data privacy, began to resonate. Distracted executives, who had been glancing at their phones or shuffling papers, slowly looked up. A few leaned forward, their expressions transitioning from polite indifference to genuine interest. Elena even saw Silas Croft stop glancing at his watch, a grudging acknowledgement of her impact. A confident smile touched her lips. She had them. She could feel the tide turning, a surge of power and professional satisfaction flowing through her veins. But in this room, she knew, victory was fleeting. Just as Elena reached the crescendo of her presentation, detailing HomeSync's market-disrupting potential, the heavy boardroom door opened with a soft click. All heads turned. Julian Reed, Marcus's former co-founder, strode in, his posture radiating a smug, calculated air. He offered a brief, arrogant nod to Silas, then a dismissive glance at Marcus, before his eyes landed on Elena. Her blood ran cold. The man Marcus had spoken of, the one with whom he'd had an ideological split, was here. His presence was not a coincidence. It was a deliberate, personal threat. Marcus's jaw clenched, his knuckles white where they gripped the table. The board members exchanged confused, hushed glances. Silas Croft, ever the master of manipulation, seized the moment. "Ah, Mr. Reed," he purred, his voice dripping with false cordiality. "Glad you could join us." He turned to the bewildered board. "Mr. Reed is here as a consultant, given his unparalleled expertise in Innovate's original vision." The subtle sneer directed at Marcus was unmistakable. It was a thinly veiled jab, a public endorsement of Julian, and a clear attempt to undermine Marcus's current leadership. Marcus's jaw remained tightly clenched, his eyes burning with barely contained anger. Elena could feel the palpable tension, the room alive with the unspoken power play. Silas was clearly pulling strings, and Julian was a willing puppet. Elena finished her presentation, her voice unwavering despite Julian's unsettling presence. Then, the anticipated onslaught began. Julian and Silas led the questioning, their queries probing, hostile, and designed to pick apart Carson's proposal. Julian focused on the perceived limitations of a privacy-first approach, suggesting it would hinder data monetization. Silas, meanwhile, questioned the firm's size and experience. Elena, however, was ready. She met each challenge with confident rebuttals, drawing on every piece of information Marcus had shared. Across the long table, Marcus made eye contact with her, a silent promise of support, a subtle flicker in his eyes that hinted at a plan, a reassurance that she wasn't alone in this intellectual and emotional battle. He believed in her. Julian Reed's smug satisfaction was a heavy shroud over the boardroom, but before Elena could even formulate a response to his challenging question, Marcus Thorne cut him off. Actually, Julian. Marcus's voice was calm, but the edge beneath it was sharp enough to cut glass. Our internal analytics show a 27% increase in user trust for platforms explicitly prioritizing local data processing over cloud-based. Your data, I believe, is from 2 fiscal quarters ago. Elena felt a surge of relief, a wave of support washing over her. Marcus didn't just refute Julian. He disarmed him with precision. He then held Julian's gaze, a silent, powerful challenge passing between them, daring Julian to betray his deeper complicity. Elena saw the flicker of discomfort in Julian's eyes, a momentary flinch before he quickly recomposed himself. This wasn't just about data. It was about loyalty, and Marcus was forcing Julian to choose. Silas Croft, however, wasn't about to let Marcus's intervention gain any traction. With a condescending smile that didn't reach his eyes, he waved a dismissive hand. While Mr. Thorne's data is, naturally, interesting, he purred, emphasizing the word with a subtle sneer, Mr. Reed's extensive experience and the market insights provided by Apex Marketing align far more closely with the board's strategic vision. We have already established a clear direction. Elena felt a fresh wave of indignation. It was blatant, an open declaration of bias. Silas wasn't even attempting to hide the fact that the decision was predetermined, regardless of the quality of Carson's pitch. Marcus's jaw tightened, his anger barely contained, but Elena knew this was just another piece of the puzzle, confirming everything Marcus had warned her about. Her own resolve hardened. Taking a deep breath, Elena stepped forward, reclaiming the floor. Her voice, steady and clear, cut through the lingering tension. "Gentlemen, ladies," she began, sweeping her gaze across the board, "I understand the allure of familiar partnerships. But as we've shown, the landscape is changing." With a confident click, she advanced her presentation to a final, impactful slide. It was a clean, striking graphic, illustrating a direct correlation between robust privacy policies and soaring brand loyalty. "Trust," she declared, her passion resonating, "is the new currency, and in the smart home market, privacy isn't just a feature, it's good business." She met Julian's eyes, watching his smug expression falter, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face as the data stared back at him. Across the table, Marcus offered her a subtle, proud smile. The room fell into a thick silence, the weight of Elena's words hanging in the air. Silas, his face now a mask of barely concealed fury, abruptly stood. "Thank you, Ms. Vance. Your presentation was noted," he said, his tone clipped and final. "This meeting is adjourned. The board will reconvene to make its decision." He turned to leave, dismissing them all. But as Elena gathered her notes, her eyes met Marcus's. He gave her a nearly imperceptible nod, a subtle tilt of his head that conveyed both profound approval for her performance and a silent, urgent warning. The pitch was over, but the real game was just beginning. It was a signal, clear as day. Our plan is in motion. As the Carson team made their way to the elevator, David, usually composed, slumped against the wall, a sigh escaping him. "Elena, that privacy angle was brilliant. Truly. You outdid yourself." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "But I don't know if it was enough." Silas's bias was practically screaming from his seat. "Julian Reed showing up. That just sealed it, didn't it?" Elena nodded slowly, her own relief at having finished the pitch mingling with a fresh wave of worry. David's words echoed her own lingering concerns. Julian and Silas were powerful, and their hostility was a tangible force. Even a brilliant pitch might not be enough to overcome such entrenched corruption. The confined space of the elevator seemed to shrink around her, the weight of the antagonists, influence pressing down. Hours later, the Carson and Associates office was quiet, emptied of the day's frantic energy. Elena sat alone at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen, the events of the pitch replaying in her mind. Her phone buzzed, startling her. An unknown number, but she knew. It was Marcus. His text was terse. "Munch's Parkside Cafe. Important developments." Now, her heart leaped into her throat. Munch's important developments. The words hung in the dim office, amplifying the urgency. Hesitation warred with a potent curiosity, a sense of impending drama. She knew this was it. The next phase. Marcus needed her. Taking a deep breath, Elena grabbed her bag. Elena found Marcus in a secluded corner booth at the Parkside Cafe, a dim, private spot. He looked utterly exhausted, a vulnerability she hadn't seen since that first night in the hospital. He was nursing a whiskey, his tie loosened, his normally sharp gaze shadowed with fatigue. "Marcus?" Elena's voice was soft, concerned. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers, and the raw emotion there shocked her. "Silas is making his move, Elena," he stated bluntly, his voice rough. "He's pushing for a board vote to remove me as CEO. It's happening fast." Elena felt a cold dread creep up her spine. "Remove you? But why? What about the pitch? What about Innovate?" She couldn't believe it. This wasn't just about a marketing contract anymore. This was a corporate coup. Marcus took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes fixed on some distant point. "Silas wants to monetize user data, Elena. He sees HomeSync not as a privacy solution, but as a goldmine for personal information. He believes in selling it, trading it, making a fortune off it." Elena's stomach churned. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was an ideological war for the soul of Innovate Technologies. Marcus's vision of privacy and integrity versus Silas's greed and exploitation. The depth of the corruption, the betrayal of Innovate's founding principles, was sickening. "He wants to gut everything you built," Elena murmured, her voice laced with disgust. "Everything you believe in," Marcus nodded grimly. "Exactly. He can't just do that, can he?" Elena asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus shook his head, looking up, his gaze meeting hers with a grim intensity. "He can, and he will." He's arranged for Apex Marketing to make a public announcement on Monday, declaring them Innovate's new partner. It's a done deal, regardless of our pitch. It's designed to force the board's hand, to show them he's in control. Elena's heart sank, a wave of disappointment and betrayal washing over her. Monday. That was tomorrow. The crushing weight of the deadline pressed down, making their situation feel utterly desperate. Could they possibly stop this? The cafe lights blurred around them, the urgency of Marcus's words eclipsing everything else. "So, what do we do?" Elena asked, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers, a flicker of his usual strategic brilliance returning. "We expose him. We hit back with everything we have." He outlined a risky, audacious plan, detailing the ethical tightrope she would have to walk, the potential career-ending implications if they failed. He needed her to leverage her research, to connect the dots between Silas, Apex, and the deeper financial corruption he suspected. It was dangerous, fraught with peril, and could destroy both their careers. Elena listened, her mind racing, weighing the immense personal and professional risk against the righteous anger that now burned within her. She took a deep, steadying breath, meeting his gaze. "I'm in," she said, her voice unwavering. Marcus's face softened, a profound relief washing over him. He reached across the table, his hand briefly covering hers. A silent pact, a shared purpose, a bond forged in the crucible of impending battle. The weekend vanished in a blur of caffeine and frantic energy. Elena's apartment, usually a haven of quiet order, had transformed into a chaotic war room. Documents were strewn across the coffee table. A laptop glowed with spreadsheets and legal filings, and half-empty mugs of lukewarm coffee littered every surface. She was deep in operation integrity, fueled by an exhausting but exhilarating resolve. Every lead, every faint connection Marcus had provided, she chased with the tenacity of a bloodhound. The biggest challenge had been piecing together the convoluted ownership of Harrington Global Ventures, a shell company Silas used. It was a labyrinth of offshore accounts and proxies, designed to obscure, but Elena, with her sharp, analytical mind, found the thread. A crucial anomaly in a public corporate registry, a forgotten signature on an obscure filing. It was the smoking gun, confirming Silas's son-in-law as the true owner. Her heart pounded with a mix of exhaustion and triumph. She was on the precipice of something huge. Monday morning dawned with a deceptive calm. Elena walked into Carson and Associates, her outward composure belying the storm of anticipation churning within her. David met her at her desk, his face grim. "Innovate Technologies," he began, his voice flat. "They've decided to go in a different direction. Apex marketing, I imagine." Elena feigned a moment of surprised disappointment, a carefully practiced expression. Then, as David turned to walk away, she offered him a mysterious, confident smile. He didn't see it, but the subtle mischievousness in her eyes hinted at a game far from over. The office buzzed with its usual morning chatter, completely oblivious to the corporate earthquake about to hit. At 1 p.m., Elena arrived at Innovate Technologies, the headquarters buzzing with an unusual, expectant energy. She was escorted to a packed boardroom, where a dozen executives, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension, were already seated. At the head of the polished table, Silas Croft and Julian Reed sat side by side, a picture of smug satisfaction. Silas's gaze, when it landed on Elena, was cold and dismissive. "Ms. Vance," he sneered, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding. This is a private board meeting, not a public forum for failed pitches." Elena met his stare, her heart thrumming, but her expression remained serene. The final battle was about to begin. Before Silas could continue his tirade, Marcus Thorne rose from his seat opposite the board chair. His presence was commanding, his voice cutting through the hushed room. "On the contrary, Mr. Croft," Marcus stated, his eyes locking with Silas's, "Ms. Vance is here at my invitation." A gasp rippled through the room. Silas's face reddened, but Marcus pressed on, his gaze unwavering. "Before we make any public announcements, I believe the board needs to see something crucial to Innovate's integrity." Silas sputtered, attempting to protest, but Marcus's authority was undeniable. Elena, empowered by his public defiance, offered him a confident nod and moved purposefully towards the projector. Elena connected her laptop, the Innovate logo flashing briefly before her presentation appeared. She clicked to a new slide, revealing a complex web of financial records. "Members of the board," she began, her voice clear and steady. "These are records of unusual transactions. Significant payments from Apex Marketing, specifically to a shell company, Harrington Global Ventures." She paused, letting the name hang in the air. A company, incidentally, owned by Mr. Silas Croft's son-in-law. Silas's face turned a violent shade of crimson, his initial shock giving way to furious denial. Disbelief rippled through the room as the executives exchanged stunned glances. Elena, unperturbed, continued to lay out the damning evidence. "But that's not all," Elena pressed on, clicking to the next slide. A video clip began to play showing Apex Marketing's CEO casually discussing a new smart home product that eerily mirrored HomeSync's unique, privacy-focused features. The CEO, unaware he was being recorded, boasted about inside information, allowing them to get ahead. Marcus stepped forward, his voice resonating with controlled anger. Apex Marketing wasn't just a competitor. They were actively engaged in corporate espionage. They were gathering sensitive inside information about HomeSync, provided by Mr. Croft, to help another client beat Innovate to market with our own innovations. Silas erupted, slamming his hand on the table, but the video and Marcus's words had already sealed his fate. Marcus turned, his gaze now falling heavily on Julian Reed. The room held its breath. "And, Julian," Marcus said, his voice laced with a deep disappointment that cut deeper than any anger, "were you aware of this scheme? Was your consulting role with Mr. Croft simply a cover to gather intelligence on the company you helped build?" Julian, who had been smug moments before, now sat frozen. His eyes darted around the room, unable to meet Marcus's unwavering stare. He opened his mouth, then closed it, his silence a damning confession. The weight of his betrayal hung heavy in the air, a personal wound laid bare for all to see. Elena, seizing the moment, presented more incriminating emails, solidifying the case. Evelyn Hayes, a senior board member whose face had hardened with disgust, took charge. "I move," she announced, her voice firm, "that we immediately delay the press announcement, convene an emergency session, and temporarily remove Mr. Croft from his position as board chair, pending a full investigation." The motion passed with a resounding majority. Silas Croft, bellowing protests and threats, was swiftly escorted out by security. As the room erupted in shocked murmurs, Julian Reed, his face pale and eyes wide with shame, quietly slipped out a side door, melting into the background before anyone could stop him. A wave of relief washed over Elena as the chaos subsided. Marcus turned to her, a profound gratitude in his eyes. "Elena," he said, his voice low and sincere, "thank you. We couldn't have done this without you." Their teamwork had been flawless. Moments later, Marcus invited her to join him at an impromptu press conference. Standing confidently beside him, Elena watched as he announced a delay in naming a marketing partner for Innovate, hinting strongly that a new, integrity-driven collaboration was on the horizon. The cameras flashed. Headlines were already forming in the journalists' minds, and a new chapter for Innovate, and for Carson and Associates, had just begun. 3 months later, the world was a different place. HomeSync was a resounding success. Carson and Associates had officially secured the Innovate account, and Elena Vance had been promoted to senior director. She met Marcus at Parkside Cafe, the familiar corner booth, now feeling like a personal landmark. "I have something to tell you," Marcus began, a soft smile playing on his lips. He confessed everything, how he'd learned about her, her talent, her integrity, and how he'd orchestrated their initial wrong room encounter at the hospital. "I had a gut feeling," he admitted, "that our connection was destined, but it needed a little nudge." Elena was stunned, then touched by his audacious sincerity. He then slid a proposal across the table. "Innovate is expanding upstate, building a new campus. I want Carson to head our marketing division there, and I want you to lead it. A satellite office, your own team, completely autonomous." He paused, his blue eyes searching hers. "And, Elena," he added, his voice dropping, "I also want to explore what we've built, beyond business. A life, perhaps? Starting with a real date. No pitches, no corporate espionage, just us." Elena's heart soared. She laughed, a joyous, free sound. "I'm in, Marcus," she said, her voice full of emotion. He reached across the table, his hand finding hers, pulling her gently forward. As their lips met, a tender kiss sealing their future, Elena knew that sometimes the wrong turn leads you exactly where you were always meant to be.